Let's start with a simple truth. In the grim darkness of the far future, there's not just war. There's work. Hard, dirty, soul-crushing work. The Imperium of Man spans 1,000,000 worlds and runs on the backs of countless ordinary people doing extraordinarily awful jobs. Think your job is bad? Trust me, after this tour of imperial drudgery, your day at the office will feel like a luxury spa. Welcome to the nightmare employment agency of the 41st Millennium, waste management in the Underhive. We begin at the bottom of the ladder, quite literally deep in the guts of a hive city. Hive cities are colossal urban towers, housing billions, and all those people produce mountains of garbage and rivers of filth. Who handles that? The unlucky souls in Underhive waste management. Imagine wading through knee-deep toxic sludge in pitch-dark maintenance tunnels, armed with nothing but a rusty shovel and a prayer to the God Emperor that the sump rats don't grow too big this week. These workers, sometimes called sump divers or recyclers, must filter human waste, industrial runoff, and the occasional corpse out of the hive's water supply. It's a bit like being a sewer worker today, except the sewers are 1,000 years old, filled with mutagenic chemicals, and home to carnivorous rats the size of dogs. If the poisonous fumes don't get you, a mutated sewer creature might. Oh, and the pay? Let's just say promotions are rare, mostly because hardly anyone survives long enough to get one. Now, within this glamorous sanitation department, one particular duty stands out: cleaning the latrines used by ogrins. Ogrins are abhuman brutes employed by the Imperial Guard. 10 feet tall, insanely strong, and not exactly known for delicate manners. An ogreen eats roughly 5 times what a normal man does, and trust me, it all comes out the other end. Someone has to clean those gigantic toilets. Picture a single unfortunate maintenance tech or servitor with a mop standing outside an Ogrin barracks restroom, face contorted in horror, waiting for the all-clear to go in with a hazmat suit. It's not just the smell that might kill you. There's the very real risk of drowning in, well, Ogrin output. If ever you've complained about cleaning up after your pet, spare a thought for the poor Imperial hydraulic technician up to his elbows in an Ogrin latrine. This job is literally as crappy as it gets. Hive City corpse, starch, processor. Still in the hive cities, let's talk about what happens to the dead, because even death offers no escape from drudgery here. On many overcrowded worlds, when citizens die, their bodies don't get a peaceful burial. Instead, they're sent to the corpse guilds. These are factories where cadavers are rendered down into a protein paste called corpse starch, which is then formed into nutrition bars to feed the living. Yes, cannibalism is just another day at the office in the Imperium. Working at a corpse starch factory might be the most macabre assembly line in human history. Your daily tasks include chopping up human remains, shoveling limbs into grinders, and skimming off fat from boiling vats of human soup. The stench is beyond description, a nauseating mix of rot, chemicals, and boiled flesh that no amount of recaf, imperial coffee, can mask. Workers quickly become numb to horror, or they break down entirely. A wrong move near the grinder, and you might join the product line as tomorrow's lunch. And if the thought of handling dead flesh all day isn't bad enough, consider the psychological toll. Every corpse might have been a friend, a neighbor, or at least someone who was alive yesterday. But to meet the factory quota, you can't think of them as people, just raw material. It's grueling, gory work, and the only upside is at least you're not on the menu. Yet. Forge World Foundry Worker. Leaving the hives, let's visit a Forge World. Planets entirely covered in factories and run by the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Here, the air is a hazy soup of smoke and metal fumes, and the sun is rarely seen through the smog. The life of a foundry worker on a forge world is an endless shift in a giant, deafening factory where the machines are holy, and you, the human, are just another cog. Imagine toiling 18 hours a day casting artillery shells or pressing armor plates in furnaces hot enough to melt your skin. You cough up black soot every morning, if you ever see morning since you live under artificial light perpetually. Safety standards? Don't make me laugh. In the Imperium, if a machine malfunctions and chops your arm off, your overseers are more likely to discipline you for tech heresy, offending the machine spirit, than to offer medical aid. Actually, losing a limb might earn you a blessing. The Mechanicus priests will replace it with a bionic one, assuming you met your production quota. If not, they might just recycle you as a servitor. More on that later. Forge world laborers often have their sense of taste or smell surgically removed so they can endure the toxic environment and focus on work without going mad. They're fed nutrient paste made from recycled biomatter, yes, likely the same corpse starch we just discussed, with a bit of algae mixed in for flavor. Free time is non-existent. Family life is a forgotten concept. You live in a crowded hab dormitory on the factory premises, and your only companionship is the constant metallic thrum of machines that will outlast you. After a short few years of radiation exposure, chemical lung damage, and sheer exhaustion, your body gives out. But don't worry. The Adeptus Mechanicus will find a use for your corpse, too. On a Forge World assembly line, human resources are quite literal and endlessly expendable. Administratum clerk, bureaucrat hell. Perhaps you fancy something less filthy. How about a nice desk job in the Imperial Administratum? Surely pushing papers in a grand office on Holy Terra or a sector capital is safer than sewers and forges, right? Welcome to bureaucracy hell. The Adeptus Administratum is the Imperium's colossal civil service, employing untold billions of clerks and scribes to manage records across the galaxy. As a junior clerk, you are a human cog in a machine made of paper. You work in a dimly lit scriptorum vault, crammed into a cubicle among tens of thousands of identical cubicles stretching farther than the eye can see. Your job might be something astoundingly trivial, like updating casualty statistics from a war that ended a century ago, or transcribing grain shipment manifests for a planet you will never visit. Each day, stack upon stack of parchment crosses your desk for copying and cross-filing. The paperwork never stops. There is no completion, only more paperwork. The working conditions are as monotonous as they are cruel. You'll be seated on a hard, cold metal stool for 14-hour shifts, eyes straining under flickering lumen globes, copying figures from one form to another. Talking is forbidden. Efficiency is everything. Mistakes are absolutely not tolerated. Misfile the Emperor's tithes or enter a wrong digit on a form and you could be fined, flogged, or simply vanish into the depths of the penal archives. The pay is barely enough to afford your daily ration of corpse starch gruel. Actually, you're lucky if you even get real food. Many clerks subsist on bland nutrient pills, so they don't have to leave their desks for meal breaks. Personal time? Perhaps a few minutes to whisper a prayer at your desk shrine and beg the Emperor for deliverance from chronic back pain and the creeping insanity of endless bureaucracy. Retirement is a myth. Most administratum clerks die at their posts, slumped over ledgers in the dark. Those that don't are sometimes promoted, which only means a larger pile of reports to process each day. And should the administratum issue you a cogitator, a computer, to help with your work, Emperor save you from the nightmare of tech support. Yes, even in the 41st millennium, there's essentially IT support, and it's as dreadful as you expect. If your cogitator malfunctions, a scowling tech priest eventually shuffles over to chastise you for angering the machine spirit. He'll mutter incantations of repair and maybe actually check the circuitry. If it can't be fixed, guess who will be held responsible for lost data? Certainly not the machine. A clerk's life is one of silent, thankless drudgery. The only solace is that at least you're not getting shot at or eaten alive, but some days even a lasgun volley might feel preferable to another 1,000-page census correction. Penal legionnaire, suicide soldier. Let's turn now to those whose misfortune landed them on the wrong side of imperial law. Committing a crime in the Imperium, anything from petty theft to speaking against a minor official, can earn you a death sentence. But why waste a body outright when it can be used as cannon fodder? Enter the penal legions. These are Imperial Guard units made up entirely of convicts who are given a chance to serve the Emperor in exchange for a slim hope of redemption, or at least a postponement of execution. Sounds almost noble until you realize what the job entails. Penal legionnaires are equipped with explosive collars or implants to ensure they obey orders. Their commanders send them on the most dangerous assaults imaginable, storm that fortified enemy bunker head-on, run across that minefield, or charge those tyrannids with nothing but a knife. If they hesitate or try to flee, boom, the commanding officer hits the detonator. If they miraculously survive the suicidal mission, they might get another one tomorrow. Eventually, if by some emperor-given miracle a convict survives enough missions, say 5 or 10, the number varies by regiment, they are theoretically pardoned. In practice, almost none survive that long. The life expectancy of a penal soldier once deployed to a war zone is measured in days, maybe hours. Their fellow guardsmen treat them with a mix of pity and caution, and make sure to stay well behind them when a charge is ordered. As a penal legionnaire, you're not just expendable. You're literally a dead man walking, kept alive only until you've expended your usefulness on the battlefield. Now, imagine being the officer in charge of such a unit, the Penal Legion Overseer. Sounds a bit better than being one of the grunts, right? Not by much. You're responsible for herding the galaxy's worst criminals into battle. They hate you for obvious reasons. You're armed with a gun and that detonator to control them, but you also have to turn your back on these cutthroats daily. Many overseers don't live long. Fragging, getting shot in the back by your own men, is a common fate if you show the slightest weakness. On the other hand, if you crack down too harshly, you might provoke a riot or an escape attempt. It's a high-stress, short-lived command. If the enemy doesn't kill you, your own charges just might. Redemption through blood. Arcoflagellants and repentia. Speaking of mixing crime with atonement, the Imperium has punishments arguably worse than a quick execution. Arcoflagellation is one such fate. Imagine you're a condemned heretic or criminal whom the ecclesiarchy, the imperial church, decides might be redeemable. They won't just put you in a labor camp. No, they will surgically and chemically alter you into a mindless berserker known as an arcoflagellant. This job is not one you apply for. It's inflicted on you. The process involves grafting weaponized bionics into your body. Your arms might be replaced with implanted electro-whips or chainsaw blades. They pump you full of combat chemicals and implant a control chip in your brain. They also lobotomize you, eradicating your personality and intellect, but often leaving just enough of your mind intact so you can appreciate the agony of your condition. In battle, a priest or handler speaks a trigger phrase, perhaps reciting a sacred verse, and you become a living weapon. You charge the enemy in a frenzied haze, feeling nothing but a twisted ecstasy of violence until either everything around you is dead or your own body finally gives out from the strain. Outside of battle, you're kept in chains, half-conscious and in constant torment from neural implants that punish any deviant thought with searing pain. It's arguable that by the time you've become an arco-flagellant, you're no longer truly a person with a job. You're an object, a disposable attack dog. But it's one of the worst fates the Imperium hands out in the name of redemption. They claim it might save your soul through this forced service. Whether or not it does, your body certainly won't last long. In a similar vein of pious brutality, consider the Sisters Repentia. These are former battle sisters, the elite warrior nuns of the ecclesiarchy, who have committed some grave failure or sin in the eyes of their order. Perhaps she hesitated in battle, showed pride, or harbored doubt. Nothing escapes the harsh judgment of the ecclesiarchy. Her punishment is to seek redemption in death. A Sister Repentia is stripped of her power armor, the very protection that kept her alive, and sent into battle wearing nothing but a simple robe or scraps of cloth, armed only with an eviscerator, a gigantic two-handed chainsaw sword. She and her Repentia squad charged directly at the enemy's most fearsome targets or fortified lines, howling prayers of penitence. It's as suicidal as it sounds. Most are cut down by gunfire long before reaching the enemy, or torn apart by the monstrosities they seek to slay. But for these fanatics, dying gloriously is the only acceptable outcome. If by some incredible circumstance a Sister Repentia survives a battle after cutting through her foes, it's seen as the Emperor granting her another chance to die properly next time. She'll be thrown into the next assault, and the next, until she finally earns absolution in death. The job of a Repentia is essentially to martyr yourself as violently as possible. It's terrifying, but at least it's voluntary, in a way. These women genuinely believe in atoning for their sins with their blood, even if it means charging a Chaos Space Marine with nothing but a chainsword and zeal. The only upside: you won't live long enough to regret your life choices. Servitor. Living automation. Spare a moment for those poor souls who get recycled in a particularly bleak way. A servitor is not so much an occupation as a final condition you might end up in after many of the aforementioned jobs or punishments. The Imperium shuns true artificial intelligence, so it uses cyborgs, human bodies with machine parts and heavily lobotomized brains, programmed for simple tasks. Criminals, failed officials, or just unlucky citizens might all end up as raw material for servitors. If you become one, you technically have a job. Maybe it's opening and closing a blast door all day, or carrying ammunition crates, or scrubbing floors, or acting as a living computer in some cogitator array. But you won't complain about it because you no longer have the capacity to even understand your misery. Usually. The horror is if the lobotomy and reprogramming are not perfectly done, and with the Imperium's assembly line justice, quality control can slip. There are whispered stories of servitors who retained flickers of their former consciousness. Imagine being trapped in your own body, unable to control your words or actions, dimly aware that you've become a cybernetic slave. You might spend every waking moment silently screaming, trying to stop your hands from doing what they're doing, but you can't. Instead, you dutifully mop corridors for decades, or load artillery shells, all the while internally begging for death that never comes. One particularly horrid example that hive workers like to frighten each other with is the La Latrine servitor. As crude as it sounds, some wealthy nobles or officers have servitors whose sole function is to act as living lavatories, tanks and tubes grafted into what was once a person, forever humiliated in function, yet supposedly brain-dead enough to perform the task. We can only hope those poor individuals truly have no awareness of what they've become, because the alternative, even a shred of consciousness, would make this fate one of the cruelest in a very cruel galaxy. Astropath. Soul-bound telepath. Let's move from bodily horror to psychic horror. If you are born a psyker, a human with psychic abilities, in the Imperium, Life is a special kind of hell, no matter what path you take. The most common fate for an imperial psyker is to be rounded up by the Inquisition's black ships and hauled to Terra, where 99 out of 100 will be sacrificed to the Emperor. We'll get to that in a moment. But a lucky or unlucky, depending on perspective, few are selected to become astropaths instead. Astropaths are essential to the Imperium. They send telepathic messages across interstellar distances, acting as the backbone of galactic communication. To prepare them, they undergo a ritual called soul binding with the Emperor himself. Sounds honorable, right? In reality, it's an incredibly agonizing and perilous ordeal. Dozens of psykers at a time are brought before the Golden Throne. The Emperor, a decaying immortal psychic god king, reaches out with his mind and forges a connection with each psyker, strengthening their soul to handle the rigors of warp communication. Many aspirant astropaths don't survive the soul binding at all. Their brains fry like eggs on a hot griddle under the Emperor's psychic presence. Those who do survive are forever changed. Virtually all of them are blinded, their physical eyes literally burnt out of their skulls by the intensity of what they witnessed. They also carry mental scars. Some go mad immediately. Others maintain a tenuous hold on sanity only through faith and the Emperor's constant guidance in their minds. So congratulations, you lived. Now you get to spend the rest of your life as a sanctioned astropath. You'll be organized into choirs on ships or planets, sitting in a dark chamber, eyes bandaged or replaced by cybernetic sockets, sending and receiving messages through the warp using only your mind. It's exhausting work. Each message sent or received takes a bit of your life essence and invites the risk of attracting unwanted attention. By that I mean warp entities, predatory demons ever eager to slither into an unguarded psyche. Astropaths guard against this by chanting litanies, warding their chambers with hexagrammic wards, and relying on the Emperor's boon from the soul binding. But it's never a guarantee of safety. Many astropaths go insane over time from the things they sense in the darkness between stars. The lucky ones might simply suffer debilitating migraines and nightmares. The less lucky abruptly suffer soul burnout. One day their mind just implodes under the strain, leaving them a lifeless husk. And the truly unfortunate might attract the interest of a particularly nasty warp entity and become possessed mid-transmission, which usually ends with the astropath's colleagues executing them before the demon can fully manifest. It's a noble duty sending out those vital messages, and astropaths are revered as holy servants of the Emperor for their sacrifice. But on a personal level, being an astropath is a one-way ticket to a short and haunted life. You will never see the light of day again, literally since you're blind. You will rarely know a moment of true peace, and you will die far from home, your soul hopefully going to the Emperor before something in the warp snatches it. Psychic choir sacrifice. Astronomican technician. Worse than being an astropath, however, is being deemed not useful enough to keep around. The vast majority of psykers collected by the Imperium have one ultimate destination: fuel for the Golden Throne. Deep beneath the Imperial Palace on Terra, the Emperor is kept barely alive, and he projects the Astronomicon, a psychic lighthouse that guides all Imperial ships through the warp. That beacon must never falter, or humanity's galaxy-spanning empire would be lost in the darkness. But keeping it lit has a terrible cost. Every single day, roughly 1,000 psykers are sacrificed to the Emperor to sustain his power and the Astronomicon's light. So one of the jobs you might find yourself drafted into, if you can call it a job, is Astronomicon Choir Psyker. You won't find this posting on a recruitment poster because it's not a volunteer position. It's more like a death sentence dressed up as an honor. Psykers from all over the galaxy are brought to Terra, The strongest or most useful may become Inquisitorial psychers or astropaths, but the rest are led in chains to enormous underground holding cells, unsure of their fate. Perhaps a clergyman gives an inspiring speech about how they will become one with the emperor and give their life in the holiest of causes. Then, in groups, they are marched into the sacrifice chambers. Through ancient and bizarre techno-arcane means, their souls and life force are drained away to nourish the dying emperor and keep the Astronomicon shining. The process is beyond horrific. Imagine the worst pain you can conceive: being burned, flayed, and electrocuted at once, amplified through every nerve of your body and every corner of your mind. And instead of lasting for a moment, it lasts for hours, maybe days, as the machinery carefully extracts every last drop of psychic energy. The screams of the dying psychers are said to echo through the halls. Some go mute from sheer pain, their mouths open in a silent howl, until mercifully their consciousness flickers out. Their sacrifice keeps the Emperor's spirit strong enough to send out that vital guiding light to humanity's fleets. In a way, these nameless souls are the unseen heroes of every ship's voyage. But heroism in the Imperium often goes hand in hand with unimaginable suffering. When it's over, caretakers, likely servitors themselves, dispose of the withered husks that remain, and the next batch is brought in. There's never an end to it. As long as the Imperium endures, more psychers will be needed tomorrow. It's a hidden horror feeding the very heart of the Imperium. For those chosen to serve in this way, it's a one-shift career, all pain and then blessed oblivion. If there's any consolation, it's that their terrified last moments are spent in the presence of the Emperor's own immense psychic aura. Perhaps they do genuinely feel his gratitude and warmth, even as they burn away. But still, as far as worst jobs go, being literal soul fuel is right at the top. Sanctioned psyker in the Guard. Let's say you're a psyker who avoids being sacrificed or soul-bound. Perhaps you're strong-willed, or lucky enough that the Imperium decides to use you on the battlefield instead. You become a sanctioned psyker, basically a combat wizard attached to the Imperial Guard or other Imperial forces. You might think, hey, at least I get to use my powers and fight the enemies of man. That could be exciting. Well, it is exciting, right up until the moment it's horrifying. Being a sanctioned psyker is one of the most dangerous frontline jobs, and not only because the enemy is shooting at you. Using the warp, the source of your psychic power, is inherently perilous. Every time you reach into that immaterium to cast a lightning bolt or set an orc's head on fire with your mind, you flirt with forces beyond mortal understanding. One mental slip, one lapse in concentration, and instead of frying the enemy, you might accidentally tear open a hole to the warp. That's like punching a hole in reality's dam and letting the flood of demons crash through. If you're lucky, the tear is small and only your soul gets sucked out, or a minor horror pops through. If you're unlucky, well, there might not be anyone left alive to call it unlucky. Even when things go right for a psyker, it's a rough gig. The Imperial Guard is already a dangerous service, but as the psyker you carry an extra stigma. Many of your fellow guardsmen fear or distrust you. They've heard stories, every soldier has, about psychers whose heads exploded or whose eyes turned black right before they butchered their whole squad under demonic influence. So you might not have a lot of drinking buddies in your regiment. Your commanding officer, on the other hand, sees you as a useful tool, one that must be carefully watched. In every company with a psyker, there's usually a commissar nearby. Commissars are political officers known for executing anyone who shows cowardice or disobedience. With psychers, their job includes executing you at the first sign you're chanting in dark tongues, or your shadow starts moving on its own. Knowing that your ally has a loaded bolt pistol ready to blow your brains out if you sneeze wrong does not make for a relaxing work environment. On the battlefield, you're both a target and a weapon. Enemy snipers love to pick off the psyker first. After all, you're the guy who might summon a tornado or melt a tank with your mind. So you tend to attract a lot of unwanted attention. Using your powers often paints a big psychic bullseye on you for enemy witches or demons, too. You might find yourself locked in a mind duel with a chaos sorcerer, your sanity and soul on the line, while mortars explode around you. It's the definition of multitasking under pressure. And as if that weren't enough, your powers can physically wreck you even without warp mishaps. Drawing too deeply on the warp might scorch your synapses, leaving you drooling and brain dead. Lesser accidents can cause nosebleeds, migraines, or temporary blindness. In some Imperial Guard memoirs, psychers are described after battle as having eyes sunken entirely black, or veins visible and pulsing on their faces, their bodies shaking from the strain of channeling so much raw energy. They often die of aneurysms, strokes, or heart failure if they push beyond their limits. So yes, as a sanctioned psyker, you might have a rank and some respect, and your life isn't as immediately hopeless as a penal legionnaire's. But you live on a razor's edge between glorious victory and a terrifying death, or damnation. And if you survive long enough to get good at it, they might promote you to an Inquisitor's retinue, or a Space Marine chapter as a psyker liaison, which sounds nice. Except those also tend to be environments where if you slip up, someone will execute you as a matter of protocol. Inquisitorial acolyte. How to die in every possible way. The Inquisition. Now we're at the deep end of imperial employment. The Inquisition is the secretive organization that hunts heresy, demons, and aliens with extreme prejudice. To be an inquisitor is to carry the burden of absolute authority and the risk of dying in extremely gruesome ways on a daily basis. But not many talk about the acolytes and agents who serve under an inquisitor. They have, arguably, one of the worst job descriptions ever. Do whatever the Inquisitor says, no matter how dangerous, immoral, or insane, and maybe you'll live long enough to get a thank you. An inquisitorial acolyte could be anyone, a savvy hive-ganger, the Inquisitor recruited for local expertise, a scholar from the Administratum who knew too much, a former guardsman with a steady aim, or even a repentant heretic trying to win forgiveness by aiding the Inquisition. Regardless of background, once you're in, you're expendable. Inquisitors often operate in small teams, and every member of that team is expected to face the most terrifying threats in the galaxy head-on. One mission, you might be infiltrating a cult that worships a chaos god, pretending to share their deranged beliefs until you can sabotage their ritual from within. If your cover is blown, your colleagues will make what happened to Julius Caesar look like a love tap. Another mission, you might be delving into an ancient catacomb to retrieve a Xenos artifact radiating sickening energy. Hope you brought your rad counter and a strong stomach, because you'll probably find the previous expedition team dead and mutated down there. Next week, your Inquisitor thinks one of your teammates might be mind-controlled by a ginny stealer, so guess what? It's paranoia time. Maybe everyone gets a turn in the interrogation chair until the traitor is found. Trust and safety are luxuries you simply don't have. The stress is enormous. Acolytes live on the edge of a knife, always between their zealous boss and the unspeakable enemy. If an acolyte is captured by cultists or aliens, standard inquisitorial protocol is not to mount a big rescue. It's to assume you're compromised and either write you off or actively terminate you to prevent any secrets from getting out. And if you manage to survive multiple missions and actually learn things about the dark horrors out there. Paradoxically, that makes you a liability in the eyes of many inquisitors. They have a saying, "What an inquisitor knows can kill him. What his servants know can kill them." Many acolytes get mind wiped, memories erased, after critical missions, so they can't spill forbidden knowledge if captured or interrogated. This means you could lose chunks of your own life story as a price for doing your job well. Imagine waking up and being told, "You succeeded in the mission, but we had to erase your recollection of the last month. Good work. Here's your next assignment." It's disorienting, to say the least. On top of all that, the moral injury is real. To fight monsters, inquisitorial agents often have to do monstrous things. Maybe you've had to burn an entire village because it was tainted by a cult, including innocents. Maybe you had to double-cross someone who trusted you because they might have turned heretic. Over time, many acolytes become jaded or outright sociopathic, which might help them cope, but also puts them on a slippery slope. One day, you could become the very thing the Inquisition hunts. And if that happens, rest assured, your former colleagues will hunt you down without mercy. In short, being an inquisitorial acolyte means signing up for a high-octane blend of espionage, horror, and constant fear. There are no medals or public accolades. Your successes are classified and your failures are likely fatal. It's a job that promises you'll see the worst the galaxy has to offer, and probably die from it. Void Ship Crew, Imperial Navy Rating. The Imperium also needs millions of personnel to crew its starships, from gigantic warships to Chartist merchant vessels. At first glance, being a crew member in the Imperial Navy or on a trade ship might sound better than slogging in a trench or scrubbing sewers. You get to travel the stars, see exotic worlds, maybe wear a uniform. But hold that thought. Life as a low-deck voidsman is a special kind of awful that combines the dangers of space, the drudgery of manual labor, and the authoritarian discipline of a prison. Imperial ships are often described as flying cathedrals, enormous Gothic constructions with cavernous decks and mile-long corridors. As a new crew rating, you'll be assigned somewhere deep in the heart of this metal beast, far from any viewports. You might spend your entire life aboard and never actually see the void outside. Just bulkheads and flickering lumen strips. The work depends on your assignment, but none of it is pleasant. Perhaps you're part of a gun crew on a battleship. You and 100 other souls manhandle bus-sized artillery shells into the loading racks of a macro cannon. The shells are so heavy and dangerous that any slip can crush limbs or detonate prematurely. The gun decks are deafening when in action. Many voidsmen go permanently deaf after a single battle, or you might be part of the plasma drive maintenance teams. That involves crawling through sweltering, irradiated crawl spaces to adjust ancient machinery while the ship's engine thrums with barely contained starfire. A moment of exposure to an unshielded plasma coil will cook you alive, but if the engines aren't calibrated, the entire ship could stall in the warp, a death sentence for everyone. No pressure. Then there's damage control. Basically, the shipboard fire brigade and repair crew. In battle, when a boarding torpedo punches through the hull or an enemy lance sets part of the ship on fire, you rush in with a void suit and a kit of tools. Hull breaches might mean you're trying to weld a patch over a gaping tear while the atmosphere around you howls out into space, sucking comrades and loose objects that become high-speed projectiles into the void. If you're too slow, the compartment might be locked down and vented to extinguish the fire, with you in it. Outside of battle, there's still accidents. A misaligned warp engine, a reactor leak, a stuck airlock. A void ship is like a floating city with 1,000 ways to die at any given moment. Life support and habitat conditions for lower deck crew are Spartan. You sleep in a hive-like bunk that might be hot bunked, sharing with someone on the opposite shift. The air can be stifling and metallic tasting. Filters aren't always changed on time in the bowels of the ship. Drinking water might be recycled so many times you'd rather not think about its source. Hygiene facilities? Bring a cloth to wipe off with. Actual showers could be rare except for officers. Sickness can sweep through the packed crew decks. On some ships, a plague outbreak means the infected section gets sealed off, with those inside left to die, rather than risk spreading contagion. Discipline on Imperial ships is notoriously harsh. The ship's commissar or armsmen, military police, will not hesitate to flog or execute crew for insubordination, dereliction of duty, or sometimes just poor performance. Mutiny is the ultimate fear. Some captains preempt it by randomly executing a few crew every once in a while to keep everyone terrified. And we haven't even gotten to warp travel. When the ship enters the warp to travel faster than light, the horror element ramps up. Every crew member knows the warning signs if the Geller field, the ship's anti-demon shield, fluctuates. Strange, cold breezes, ghostly whispers echoing in the halls, feelings of dread. Most of the time, the fields hold, and that's the end of it. Just a few sleepless nights, jumpy with paranoia. But on the occasions something gets through, a demon or warp entity loose on a ship is carnage incarnate. It could manifest as a shadowy monster that rips dozens of crew apart before it's put down, or as a malignant force that causes people to go insane and turn on each other. If things get really bad, the higher-ups might purge entire sections of the ship, venting them to space or flooding them with lethal gas to kill whatever it is along with anyone who couldn't escape. The warp is also capricious with time. Journeys that felt like days can end up taking months, so you might find out people you knew topside have died or been reassigned by the time you emerge. Conversely, you might come out and realize only a week passed for the rest of the galaxy, while you endured a month of hellish travel. All told, being a void ship crewman means long periods of monotony, punctuated by episodes of sheer terror. You might not see sunlight for years. If you're on a warship, you're always in danger of sudden violent death from enemy action. If you're on a merchant vessel, pirates or raiders might board you, and you can bet the boarders won't treat lowly crew kindly. Should you ever make port, you'll likely be confined to the ship or a supervised outing. You're too valuable, and perhaps too stir-crazy, to just let loose. Many voidsmen have a tattoo or mantra, "Only in death does duty end." Nowhere is that more true than for the faceless masses keeping the Emperor's fleets running. Planetary Defense Force Trooper. We should spare some thought for the humble Planetary Defense Force soldier. The PDF is basically each planet's local militia, the poor sods who hold the line on their home world until, or unless, the Imperial Guard arrives to assist, assuming help is even coming. Being in the PDF can range from dull garrison duty to absolutely nightmarish last stands. But one thing is consistent. When things get really bad, the PDF are the first thrown into the meat grinder, and often they are also the last. Imagine you're a PDF trooper on an out-of-the-way Imperial agri-world. Most of your time has been spent breaking up farmer feuds and drilling with antiquated laser guns. Then, one fateful day, the sky fills with alien dropships. Perhaps a tyrannid hive fleet has arrived to devour all biomass, or a chaos warband has come to burn and enslave. Suddenly, you and your fellow part-time soldiers are expected to confront galaxy-scale threats with what little gear and training you have. Often, PDF units don't even have the benefit of combat experience. Some might not have live-fired their weapons except in training. Yet, there they are, facing horrors straight out of nightmare. The results are predictably bloody. In many famous invasions, the PDF fought bravely but were utterly decimated. For instance, during the first onslaught of Hive Fleet Behemoth, Countless PDF on outlying colonies were overwhelmed, their heroism and their deaths never even recorded in the wider Imperium. Even on a well-prepared world like Cadia, before its fall, the PDF, often called the Interior Guard there, had the thankless job of being the speed bump for the forces of chaos. They knew they couldn't really stop what was coming. At best, they could slow it. They went out to die by the thousands, buying time for fortress guns to sear and for shock troops to mobilize. It doesn't get more expendable than that. A dark joke among guardsmen is that the PDF are the red shirt army for the red shirt army, referencing old Terran fiction where red-shirted security always died first. Here, the Imperial Guard itself has high casualties, but the local PDF usually gets wiped out even before the Guard sets foot on the ground. Day-to-day life in the PDF during peacetime can be tolerable, if dull and underfunded. But even then, there are dangers. PDF often are tasked with responding to all sorts of planetary emergencies, uprisings, mutant infestations in the Underhives, rogue psykers terrorizing a town, wild predators from the wilderness attacking settlements, etc. So you might have to do everything from riot control, beating back starving masses of your fellow citizens protesting food shortages, to hunting down a Genestealer cult hiding in the mines. The latter, by the way, is a task that has murdered many a PDF patrol, because if they find what they're looking for, it tends to be the last thing they ever find. Equipment-wise, PDFs are lucky if they have flak armor and a standard pattern lasgun for each soldier. Some backwater PDFs might be using single-shot autoguns or locally made weapons of dubious quality. Heavy support is often outdated or improvised. Maybe a few anti-air guns from centuries ago, a handful of rusted tanks that date to the last millennium, etc. Against a serious modern foe, it's hardly sufficient. Leadership varies widely. If the planetary governor cares, the PDF might be decently trained. If not, officers might be political appointees more skilled at throwing fancy parades than tactics. Morale. Initially, many PDF troops are fighting for their own homes and families. They'll fight hard. But as casualties mount and the hopelessness of their situation becomes clear, despair can set in quickly. Unlike the Imperial Guard, PDF often have nowhere to retreat to, and no reinforcements beyond maybe some orbital defense forces. It's literally do or die, and usually it's die. If a planet's situation deteriorates and the Imperium deems it not worth saving, they might even declare Exterminatus, planetary annihilation, while some PDF are still resisting on the surface. Imagine being in a trench, fending off orcs with your last few rounds, only to look to the sky and see firestorms as the Imperium bombs your entire planet to ash. That has happened more times than anyone can count. So yes, being in the PDF is often a quick path to an unmarked grave. They have none of the support or prestige of the Imperial Guard, but they face many of the same threats. When the signal is given, shield the cities, hold the line, they go forward knowing that help might never come, that they're vastly outgunned, and that in the grand scheme of the Imperium, their deaths will likely be forgotten or filed away in a report somewhere unread. It's hard to imagine a more disheartening career, yet countless citizens take up the PDF lasgun because someone has to, and it's their home on the line. Officio Assassinorum training. Target. This last one is a rather specific nightmare, but it's too horrific not to mention. The Officio Assassinorum is the Imperium's secretive corps of super assassins. Each assassin temple, Vindicator snipers, Eversasor berserkers, Calidus shapeshifters, Calexis psychic nulls, produces walking weapons of death that can single-handedly change the course of wars. It's an elite calling for the assassins themselves. But consider what it takes to train and maintain these living weapons. For every super assassin, there are support personnel, handlers, technicians, medici, and yes, live targets for training exercises. Being one of those people is definitely among the worst assignments imaginable. Take the Eversor Temple, for instance. Eversor assassins are psycho-conditioned killing machines pumped full of combat drugs and rage stimulants. They are kept in cryostasis between missions because they are too uncontrollably violent to be around otherwise. When one is scheduled for a mission, the tech priests thaw it out and prep it. Now, if you're the poor technician overseeing this process, you are literally sitting next to a human bomb. If anything goes wrong, say the assassin wakes up too early, or the restraint systems glitch for a second, that thing will tear you in half before you can blink. Eversors have been known to annihilate entire facilities if their release goes badly. There's zero margin for error. So every time you run the revival sequence, your hands are probably shaking despite all your training, and you're reciting the Assassinorum liturgy under your breath, hoping the Emperor keeps the monster on your table asleep until the right moment. Then there's training. Assassins do practice to keep their edge when they're not on ice. For a Vindicair sniper, training might involve simulated mission setups. Not too terrible for the support staff, aside from the fear that if you accidentally walk into the wrong area, you might catch a high-caliber round meant for a test target. But for an Eversor, training is basically live combat, and they need live enemies to practice on. Who are those enemies? Typically condemned prisoners or vat-grown clones or other bendable assets the Imperium can get its hands on. So yes, part of someone's job is to procure human beings, or sometimes non-humans, to be slaughtered in training by an assassin. If you have even a scrap of empathy, facilitating that is soul-scarring. And if you don't procure enough targets, maybe your superiors will decide you will do in a pinch. The Culexis Temple might be even worse in some ways. Culexis assassins are pariahs, individuals with the untouchable gene that makes them soulless and anathema to psykers. Their presence is agony to any psyker and deeply unsettling to normal people as well. Part of their training involves honing their ability to suppress and terrify psykers. So the officio will supply captured psykers, often witches slated for execution anyway, to the Culexis Temple. If your role is, say, a handler or warden for those psyker prisoners, you have to drag them to the training chambers, knowing full well you're basically feeding them to a terror they have no defense against. A Culexis might walk calmly toward the screaming psyker, who is debilitated just by the assassin being near, and execute them with a specialized weapon. Or maybe they practice using the dreaded animus speculum, a device that projects the assassin's null aura as a weapon. If the psyker tries to fight back with psychic powers, it's like throwing snowballs at a black hole, pointless and just prolonging the suffering. It's a grim spectacle, and you're complicit in it by doing your job. Even the Calidus Temple, where shapeshifters train using drugs to impersonate targets, has its deadly side for staff. Ever heard of the polymorphine drug? It lets Calidus assassins alter their bodies to mimic others. In training, accidents can happen. An overdose, and the trainee might melt into a spasm of monstrous forms. Medical staff attending to a flailing assassin whose bones are literally reshaping uncontrollably could easily end up as collateral damage if the thrashing assassin decides in their delirium that you're an enemy. Working at the Assassinorum is a high-clearance, well-paid posting on paper. In reality, you're living in the proverbial lion's den. You can't talk about your work to anyone under pain of death. You have to maintain absolute emotional detachment because you see horrors and do morally questionable things regularly. Any slip-up, and best case, you're fired with a silenced bullet to the skull. Worst case, you die horribly as part of the job. There's a saying among those who know of the temples: The assassins never fail, and those around them aren't allowed to either. One way or another, being in the orbit of these living weapons is not conducive to a long or happy life. After this grand tour of dread and despair, you might be thinking that the life of a 21st century office worker or student doesn't seem so bad in comparison. The Imperium of Man is sustained by people enduring the unendurable every single day. Their unofficial motto might as well be, "We suffer so that humanity endures." It's grim, it's dark, and it's the reality for countless trillions of souls in the far future. From the manufactorum drudge coughing up black phlegm, to the clerk drowning in paperwork, to the cannon fodder soldier charging an alien horror with a flashlight and a prayer. These thankless jobs are the invisible pillars that keep the Imperium running, for better or mostly worse. In this catalogue of nightmare employment, if we had to pick the absolute worst job of all, some might argue it's the one held by a single unfortunate individual for the past 10,000 years. That would be the Golden Throne itself, or more specifically, the occupant of the Golden Throne. The Emperor of Mankind, revered as a god, has the most miserable office chair in existence. He has been sitting, unmoving, on life support, decaying yet undying, his soul under constant assault for millennia. His job is literally to suffer eternally so that humanity can have a light to navigate by. And even he needs 1,000 souls a day just to keep him going. Compared to that, every other job is a pleasant stroll through the park. For everyone else in the Imperium, there is no relief, except perhaps the final piece of the grave, assuming your body isn't recycled for food or your soul for fuel. So the next time you groan about your boss, your commute, or your workload, remember the billions of nameless Imperial citizens whose entire lives are spent in toil, terror, and pain. Suddenly, a Monday morning staff meeting or a long shift doesn't sound so bad. It could be worse. You could have been born in the grim darkness of the far future, where every job is the worst job, and only in death does the Emperor's work truly end.